The Federal Reserve Chair just announced that he's under investigation. He says it's retaliation. Here's what's happening and how it affects your money. On Friday, the Department of Justice served the Federal Reserve with grand jury subpoenas and threatened to criminally charge the Federal Reserve Chair, Jerome Powell, over his testimony related to a $2.5 billion headquarters renovation. Now, Fed Chair Jerome Powell came out swinging. He said in a rare video statement on Sunday night that the investigation and the testimony were just pretext, and that really the reason for the investigation is that he refused to lower interest rates when the president demanded it. And Powell's statement rings true. If you've been paying attention, you've seen the White House request or demand that the Federal Reserve lower interest rates, and you've also seen that Fed Chair Jerome Powell has by and large refused to do so, absent economic data suggesting that a lowering of interest rates is warranted. So to put this all in context, here's a bit of background information about the Federal Reserve. So the Federal Reserve controls the interest rates. So to put it simply, it raises interest rates to fight inflation, and it lowers interest rates to stimulate growth. And it's a massively powerful tool. The problem is that politicians love lower interest rates. Cheap borrowing feels good in the short term, and it also wins elections. But if the Fed just did whatever the White House wanted, we'd see runaway inflation. And we've seen that in other countries, but also in our own country. So in 1971, Richard Nixon was running for re-election, and he pressured then Fed Chair Arthur Burns to lower interest rates to help him out. Funnily enough, a lot of this is actually caught on tape because Richard Nixon recorded everything. So Burns caved, and in the short term, it worked. Unemployment dropped, and Nixon won the election in the landslide. In the long term, it was a disaster. By 1974, there was double-digit inflation. The economy fell into a deep recession. We got stagflation, which is high inflation and high unemployment at the same time. And also the dollar bought less and you couldn't find a job. It took Paul Volcker raising interest rates to nearly 20% in the early 1980s, which triggered yet another painful recession to undo the damage that Richard Nixon did. So yeah, you could lower interest rates and everybody would be happy in the short term, but in the long term, it's going to cause some real economic pain for everyone. So how does this impact you? Well, if the Fed independence is somehow negatively impacted, or future chairs believe that there will